quiet, atmospheric tone. On a warm November evening in 1948, a couple strolling along the darkening sands of Somerton Beach in South Australia spotted a man resting against the seawall. He was dressed in a pristine, tailored double-breasted suit with polished shoes. The coroner would later note he was in top physical condition, with distinctive wedge-shaped toes and pronounced high calf muscles, the kind usually seen on professional ballet dancers. But when police arrived the next morning to examine the body, they found a complete void of personal effects. He carried no wallet, he had no cash, no identification card of any kind. Someone had gone through his clothing and meticulously snipped away every single manufacturer's tag. The systematic stripping of every identifying marker transformed a routine John Doe investigation into the deliberate erasure of a human identity. The physical examination deepened the problem. The man's organs were healthy. There were no signs of disease or physical trauma to explain why a fit 43-year-old would suddenly drop dead. The coroner suspected poison, specifically an intentional overdose of a substance like digitalis, a medication used to treat heart conditions, or a barbiturate, a class of sedative drugs that severely depress the central nervous system. However, the laboratory tests returned completely clean. The toxicology screens could find absolutely no trace of any foreign substance in his blood or tissue. The police faced a paradox, an officially unnatural death involving an invisible murder weapon and a victim who technically did not exist. A month later, staff at the Adelaide railway station realized a piece of luggage had been abandoned in their cloakroom since November 30th. Detectives opened the battered brown suitcase and found a collection of everyday items: clothes, shaving gear, and a stencil brush. They linked the case to the dead man using a spool of unusual orange waxed thread. It wasn't available in Australia, but it perfectly matched the thread used to mend a seam on the trousers found on the beach. Inside the case, the name Keane appeared on a tie, a laundry bag, and a singlet, but police quickly realized the name was left intact specifically because it was a decoy, intended to send investigators searching for a non-existent missing person. The suitcase evidence proves the man was an active participant in staging his own disappearance, purposefully planting dead ends for the authorities. The investigation stalled until a pathologist re-examining the trousers felt something rigid in the waistband. It was a tiny, custom-sewn fob pocket that previous examiners had completely missed. Inside, tightly rolled into a cylinder, was a scrap of paper. Printed on it were two words in an elaborate font: Tamam Shud. The phrase translates from Persian to, "It is finished." It is the closing line of a 12th century book of poetry called the Rubaiyat, a collection focused on living life to the fullest and dying without regret. Police launched a nationwide search for the exact book the scrap was torn from. A local businessman soon came forward, having found a rare 1941 edition of the Rubaiyat, tossed randomly into the back of his unlocked car near Somerton Beach on the night of the death. The last page was torn out, but when investigators placed the back cover under ultraviolet light, they found faint pencil markings. It was a 5-line block of capital letters, an encrypted code that military intelligence and international cryptographers failed to break. Scribbled next to that cipher was the unlisted telephone number of local nurse Jessica Thompson, living just a 5-minute walk from the body. These laved artifacts elevate the case into a high-stakes puzzle of cryptography and hidden contacts. When police brought Jessica Thompson in for questioning and showed her a plaster cast of the dead man's face, she appeared terrified. Witnesses reported she looked as though she might faint, yet she adamantly denied knowing him. This bizarre web of evidence birthed two main theories. The first was espionage. The Cold War was escalating, and many believed the man was a Soviet spy, assassinated by a rival intelligence agency using an untraceable chemical agent. The second theory viewed him as a heartbroken, rejected lover. In this scenario, he drew upon his family's background in theater to stage his own tragic, poetic suicide, using the Rubaiyat and the decoy clues as props in his final performance. For 70 years, the twin extremes of international espionage and theatrical tragedy were the only logical ways to fill the vacuum of his identity. 73 years later, science caught up with the mystery. Researchers extracted DNA from hairs caught in the original plaster bust made by police. This breakthrough allowed them to use genetic genealogy, a modern technique that traces family lineages through massive global DNA databases. The genetic mapping led to a name. The Somerton Man was Carl Webb, a 43-year-old electrical engineer and instrument maker from Melbourne. But naming the ghost didn't vanish it. We know his identity, yet we still have no idea why Carl Webb traveled to that specific stretch of sand in Adelaide to die. We still don't know the true purpose of the unbreakable 5-line code, or the reality of his connection to a terrified local nurse. Modern DNA profiling can map a family tree and attach a name to a physical body, but it cannot decode the human mind. Carl Webb's final cryptic act remains a meticulously staged, permanently unsolved masterpiece of erasure.